Good evening, everybody. Bienvenue. My name is Mark Levine. I'm the president of the French American Heritage Foundation, and welcome. This is French American Heritage Foundation is a group of 19 people. We have a board of 19, and our goal and mission is to preserve and promote the French American heritage of Minnesota through education and community events. So we do things like this. What we know, because most of us have French heritage in our blood, is that there's a lot of interesting things in Minnesota that involve French heritage. So we are here to promote that and to put on events and talk about some of the history and the French heritage and history in Minnesota. And that's what we're going to be doing tonight. We do a number of events. Before I introduce Greg, our next event, we're going to be, we sponsor a number of events every year. We did a tour to Radisson earlier this year, and we're doing this event here tonight, but we're also going to be co-sponsoring an event on October 11th at the Jolie Center in Minneapolis. That's where the Alliance Française is. And we have Maddie Harbour. She works for the Minnesota Historical Society. She's got a PhD. And she's going to be doing a discussion on George Bonga. I don't know if you know who George Bonga is, but he was an African fur trader.
Every Native American.
Yeah, he also was
depending on whatever survey they were doing.
Yeah, and it's a multi-generational story of living within structures of empire, slavery, and colonialism. There's a flyer up front, but that's going to be our next event that we're going to be co-sponsoring. And tonight, we're going to be talking a little bit about, everybody knows that French and fur trade go together in Minnesota, and Greg he's a member, he's a board member, he's a French speaker, a descendant of fur traders and explorers, including Médard Chouart de Groseilliers, who was one of the first explorers and fur traders in Minnesota, a long time ago, with a guy named, you might know the name Radisson. Radisson? That name?
You got the hotels. My sister got nothing.
They started a little company called the Hudson Bay Company. Dayton Hudson, actually. They actually merged at one time.
Oh, I thought Radisson started Carlson Company.
So, but his ancestry goes back a long time and has a lot of fur trade history in his family. He's an executive in the medical device industry and is a member of the Concordia Language Villages National Advisory Council. As a staff member at the Lac du Bois, the Voyagers programs at the Concordia Language Village. And based on that, he knows a lot about the Voyagers, and he's going to talk to us tonight about the French fur trade and the Voyagers in Minnesota and some of the history. So I look forward to his presentation. Greg?
Merci, Mark.
Okay.
Oui, je m'appelle Grégoire. Je suis un voyageur. Bonsoir à tous. Don't worry, it'll be in English. So the fur trade industry played a major role in the development of the United States and Canada for over 300 years. Native Americans brought beaver, fisher, otter, mink, bear, deer, fox, muskrat, badger, raccoon, rabbit, and skunk furs to trade. Beaver, being the most valuable, was used to price or value other furs. I'm guessing the skunk furs didn't go for a while. So Europeans in turn traded goods like metal cookware, wool blankets. The Hudson Bay's blanket is, of course, a well-known one. Cotton cloth, tools, jewelry, weapons, and gunpowder for the furs. Trade goods such as alcohol and tobacco caused problems for the Native Americans and still cause problems today. So why beaver furs? Well, the fashion of the day for men was to wear top hats made of beaver fur. So you take the beaver fur and you turn it into a felt, and it would be this lovely hat. Now, they weren't for everyone. The average worker would have to spend 6 months of their yearly wage in order to have a beaver top hat, so they didn't buy them. It's only for the bourgeoisie, the middle class, upper middle class. And
did that develop because the beaver pelts were sent over there?
yes.
And they decided what to do with it?
So,
it wasn't because...
So New France was created, which is now Quebec. And New France started exporting these beaver pelts to Europe.
So they decided to make hats out of them?
That was one of the things they used it for. They made jackets and robes.
Okay.
hadn't they kind of used up all the beaver in Europe?
Yeah, there were never a lot of beaver in Europe, so,
Oh,
yeah, so
but
yes,
isn't
they
that
had.
where the hat started, was with their own beaver?
Correct, correct.
And they had to
Oh,
get
it did.
Correct.
Oh, I see, okay. got it.
They have beaver in Europe, they don't have skunks in Europe, by the way.
Oh, okay.
So maybe those skunk pelts were worth something over there. So just a few definitions before I get started. Bourgeois, gentlemen or middle class, were fur trading partners, initially French and later British. They negotiated contracts with the Voyagers. Talk about how the Voyagers came about. So my ancestor, Médard Chouart de Groseilliers, was a coureur des bois, a runner of the woods. Independent and generally unlicensed entrepreneurial French Canadians who traveled in New France and the interior of North America, usually to trade with First Nations or Native people by exchanging various European items for furs. The Voyageurs, or travelers, were contracted employees, mainly French Canadian, who worked as canoe paddlers, bundle carriers, and general laborers for fur trading firms. They were also called engagés, which means they were engaged, so hired. So this is to represent the difference between a bourgeois and a voyageur.
Upper and lower class.
You got it. So it actually, the fur trade, at least with North American furs, actually started with my ancestor and Pierre, Esprit, Radisson. They were independent fur traders from France, coureur des bois. Now there might have been people before them, but as today, they were non-documented. And they started trading around Lake Superior in the spring and summer of 1659, 1660. So in August, they returned to Montreal with 300 Native Americans and 60 canoes loaded with a wealth of skins. It's a lot of canoes. Most of them were native canoes. So the governor of New France, or what we now know as Quebec, immediately confiscated them all, charged them with trading without a license, fined them, and then threw my ancestor into jail for a while.
Oh.
Yeah. So de Groseilliers unsuccessfully returned to France to seek redress. That didn't happen. The king backed the governor. And upon his return, he and Radisson then went to Boston and finally to England to find some backers for this business opportunity. So the English decided to back them, and after one failed voyage, Charles Fort was constructed on the Hudson Bay, and in 1670, the Hudson's Bay Company was formed to conduct the fur trade. So the Hudson Bay's company is still in existence today. It transformed into basically department stores. They don't give a family discount.
Documented relatives that you had, they didn't speak English either.
They did not, they only spoke French. So there was never a portrait done of de Groseilliers, but this is what he was thought to look like. He was quite a bit older than his brother-in-law, Pierre d'Esprit. Pierre d'Esprit's sister was de Groseilliers' second wife. His first wife died. There's a whole story about his first wife if you want to hear about it later, but it's not related to the fur trade. It is related to a definitive battle for Canada.
Sir de Groseilliers was also Duluth, right?
No,
Oh, he wasn't,
he was not.
it was Radisson that was Duluth?
No, we'll get to Duluth.
All right.
But he gave his name to Gooseberry Falls, right? That's
Yes.
the thought.
Correct.
That's what I heard, yeah.
Correct. So de Groseilliers means gooseberry. Yeah. And they sure didn't have those in Europe. So there are three distinct eras to the fur trading industry, or the fur trade. From 1500 to 1760, the French had control. That ended when the British conquered New France in the Battle of the Plains of Abraham, who was de Groseilliers' first wife's father. But anyway, I'm not going to get into that. The British from 1760 until 1816 lasted until shortly after the War of 1812. Notice there, battles. 1860 to 1850, the Americans took over, and the beaver population declined and cheaper hat materials were found. And so right around 1850 was the end of the fur trade. But they had a good run. So Hudson's Bay Company set up a series of trading posts along the shores of Hudson Bay where indigenous peoples would bring their furs to trade. So come to us, we'll buy your furs. The Northwest Company was formed by Scots in 1779, and they said, we'll come to you. So they took a proactive approach by sending out brigades of canoes manned by Voyagers, from Montreal to an inland base on Lake Superior, initially Grand Portage or Grand Portage, and later Fort William, now Thunder Bay. And Fort William you can still go and visit it and get an idea for what it was like. John Jacob Astor founded the American Fur Company in 1808, capitalizing on anti-British sentiment, and his commercial strategies become a major competitor to the British commercial dominance in the North American fur trade. So, who are these voyageurs? They're mainly French-Canadian, recruited from villages and towns like Quebec, Montreal, and Trois-Rivières. So they were local folks. They could be identified by their distinctive clothing, often wearing a red toque and a sash, ceinture fléchée. So that's, fléchée means arrows. You'll see there are kind of arrows in the belt. And it's thought that these were originally Native American designs. The white cotton shirt was protection from the sun and mosquitoes. They also wore breeches with leggings and moccasins. Anybody who took Minnesota history in high school, one of the first descriptions, and I think it was by Radisson, was about the infernal mosquitoes that existed in Minnesota. And they're still here.
Great DNA.
So Voyager had to be short. For once, I'm too tall to be something. Approximately 5'4", as the space in the canoe was made for cargo. They were strong and healthy men who could withstand harsh weather conditions and maintain a very fast paddling pace. They had to at least be able to paddle 50 strokes a minute. It was expected that each Voyager, well there it is right there, would work at least 14 hours a day, paddle fast, and be able to carry 2 pièces, or bundles of 90 pounds across each portage. That's 180 pounds. Wow. If you come to the George Bonga presentation, he could carry about double that. So, very strong man. So the route from Montreal to Lake Superior and back would take 12 to 16 weeks. So the men would paddle from sunrise to sunset, having backbreaking packs of trade goods and furs over grueling portages. There were multiple risks. Many men drowned. Most of them couldn't swim. Suffered from broken limbs, twisted spines, hernias, and rheumatism. I don't think rheumatism would be the least of their issues.
We all got that.
Is it true what I heard, that they recruited people who couldn't swim because they felt that if they couldn't swim, they'd be more careful?
Yeah,
Yes, I've heard that.
and less likely to make off with the goods.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'll get check on that.
So there was a hierarchy among the voyageurs. They're what they called Montreal men, or mangeurs du lard, pork eaters. These were the men who would canoe to Grand Portage with trade goods in return with bundles of pelts. So they were basically teamsters, if you will. There were the Northmen, or hivernants. Hiver means winter, so winters. They would take the trade goods from Grand Portage to points further west of Lake Superior and trade. The hivernants, or experienced voyageurs, would spend their winters at a fort in the interior. The hivernants were a tough breed and considered themselves above the Montreal men as seasoned voyageurs. And they were often distinguished themselves from a common voyageur at the summer rendezvous gatherings by camping on different sides of the fort in the common engagé. So the class system, it exists.
Did they
Pardon me?
dress differently?
They did, yeah. So they weren't, I'm a little bit more dressed like a hivernant might be dressed than a voyageur. The voyageur had the basic clothes, and it was given to them by the firm that they worked for. So it was pretty basic stuff. There was also a pecking order in the canoe. The avant, or bowman, acted as the guide. He was experienced in the routing. He was also the motor for the canoe, had the most strength usually. The gouvernail, or steersman, sat in or stood in the stern and steered by order of the bowman.
Bowen. Bow.
Bowman, you're correct. You're correct.
Bowen.
You tell I'm not a boater. Just a canoer.
You got it.
And when I canoe, they're called avant. There was the express, or the one who could endure a high rate of paddling for several hours, maybe in the middle somewhere, because they were very long canoes. And then there was also a conducteur, or a pilot, who basically was the boss. Also judge and jury. A pilot was appointed for every brigade of 46 canoes. Yes, sir.
Who led the singing?
Whoever had the best voice.
Oh,
Ah,
So the Voyagers were known, I'm glad you brought that up here, the Voyagers were known for singing.
Marie
Because-
Trepanair knows how to sing.
She does.
I'm not the only one.
So they were going for many hours, but also they're trying to keep up a very rapid pace. So they sang lots of songs. There's one song called A la Clairefontaine,
Yeah.
but it's a different version than the French version. That's actually the French version, and there's a Quebec version.
oh,
But they had one song, I forget the name of the song off the top of my head right now, but it'll come to me. No, not that one. I'll play it later because I've got it. But it was rumored to have 1,000 verses
That could be great.
oh.
because you're paddling for 14 hours a day, you know. So guys, come up with something. No, it'll come to me. But so the Voyager diet, you had some of the Voyager diet tonight. You had rhubarb, which was one of their main staples. They needed a food that was high in calories and that would not spoil as they traveled. So they had 2 large meals, breakfast and dinner. The men began paddling before sunrise, stopping just before 8 a.m. after already paddling for 3 hours for a meal of pork, beans, and biscuit that was pre-cooked the night before, or rhubarb. They had a midday snack of pemmican and biscuits around 2 while paddling. So a working lunch. At night, they settled by the campfire to enjoy a meal of pemmican, dried peas, or cornmeal, often in the form of rhubarb, a hearty stew.
How about alcohol?
That wasn't allowed.
Don't think so. Don't think so. I think the Ever now, so the guys that stayed through the winter probably got some alcohol. But
Yeah.
not these guys.
Oh.
Now, the bourgeois were rich
Yeah.
and would give them sometimes exotic spices like curry. So sometimes they would have, curry in their rhubarb, but no wine or other spirits. Rum, no rum. There was no rum ration for these guys.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the history and the key dates. In 1670, the Dakota Sioux attacked and drove the Huron and the Ottawa out of the western Great Lakes. After this time, many Frenchmen moved into the region and began trading directly with the Native Americans. So these were the coureurs de bois. Here's your guy, Pierre. In 1679, Daniel Groseilliers, Sieur du Lut, conducts peace talks between the Anishinaabe and Dakota at Fond du Lac, which is now Duluth. It got named after him. They screwed up the spelling a little bit, but it's close. He later goes to Mille Lacs, claiming all lands for France. He returned to Lake Superior and traveled up the northwest shore, building a post on this river. Kaministiquia River, near Thunder Bay. In 1682, LaSalle traveled through the Great Lakes and down the Mississippi to its delta. So he went all the way down past New Orleans. And he claimed all lands drained by the Mississippi and its tributaries for France. So these two are important because Minnesota couldn't become a state until the Louisiana Purchase. So France owned the lower third or half of Minnesota kind of at an angle, and everything south of there kind of ballooned out this way. In 1689, a war broke out between France and England. It interrupted trade as far west as Minnesota. So you keep hearing this word Sieur, like Sieur de Groseilliers, Sieur de Lut. Those were honorary titles. So sort of, titles that they'd be given or they, because of their stature.
Lord, doesn't it mean Lord?
Not quite Lord, but
Not quite Lord.
yeah, it's something below Lord and above you guy.
And above Monsieur.
Right. So, the fort was built by Communist de Cuya. You see Grand Portage and Lac La Tri, or Rainy Lake, so this is sort of where it all got started. So in 1696, by royal edict, New France closed all its western fur posts. Trade was officially abandoned for 20 years. Illegal traders kept their operations up, however, like my ancestor. 1754, the French and Indian War started. Trade was interrupted. Most of the licensed traders and their voyagers were called east to fight against the British. In 1760, New France was conquered by England. All trading rights and privileges became British. Furs were now sent to London instead of Paris.
Was that the Plains of Abraham?
Yes, exactly right. So the Battle of Quebec, Quebec fell, 1759. Quebec fell, and the British took definitive control of Canada.
But is that when they built the wall around the city?
No, I don't think so. I think it was a walled city well before then. Yeah. Didn't work so well.
Yeah, I guess
The
so.
British blockaded the port, they couldn't get any food in, they were in tough shape. So in 1767, trade regulations were returned to the colonies and exclusive licenses were abolished. So that helped the unregulated fur trade flourish a little bit, and they introduced liquor, which was a bad thing for the Native Americans. British traders were allowed to establish wintering posts amongst the Indians, and construction began on a permanent structure and structures at Grand Portage. So this is what Grand Portage was thought to look like when they started establishing some permanent structures. You'll note the British flag over there.
So there were no structures at Grand Portage before 1767?
Not that I'm aware of.
Oh.
At least not permanent structures. They put up their teepees or whatever.
So they didn't really rendezvous there before?
They did, sure. They did, but you know, you do the rendezvous, you get the furs, and you skedaddle back north before it got too cold.
Rick, I think it's worthwhile interjecting. I was looking at a National Geographic Atlas of the U.S., the historical atlas of the U.S., and at the time of the Revolution in America, 1776 area, where we are right now was considered part of Quebec.
Yeah,
It was Lower Canada.
right.
So what changed then?
Well, this is all the wars.
Yeah, Napoleon was getting his butt kicked over in Europe, and he said he couldn't afford to have lands here. So he sold us, he sold the territories in the Louisiana Purchase to us.
We were
The
part of the
Louisiana
Louisiana
Purchase didn't include Minnesota,
It included about a third or half of Minnesota, not the upper half.
not the Red River Valley.
No, did not, no. 1791, Alexander Henry sent a group of traders to the northern war zone between the Ojibwe and the Dakota. And the first year they traded at Leech Lake, following year at Red River. They went north and then back to Grand Portage. In 1800, or by 1800, the Northwest Company operated 117 trading posts. This was big commerce. I mentioned earlier that in 1808 the American Fur Company was established. Minnesota employees included Hippolyte Dupuis, Henry Sibley, and Jean-Baptiste Faribault was not an employee, but he also did business with them. So if you go to the Sibley Historical Site, you can see all their houses there. Hippolyte Dupuis set up the first general store, and that was really where the Twin Cities started, in Mendota. Yep, Mendota. In 1804, John Sayre and his Northwest Company Voyager built the Snake River Fur Post near Pine City. And in 1815, the War of 1812 ended. The United States took back the lands that had been occupied by the British, and after this, the United States forbade any foreign traders to operate in the American territory. The Northwest Company withdrew. So American Fur Company hired ex-Northwest Fur Company traders that were, stuck in the U.S. because they had no work. And a border war started between the Northwest and the American Fur Companies, so right at the Canadian border. In 1821, the Northwest Company and Hudson Bay Company merged. Major factor in the decision was the high transportation costs shipping through the Great Lakes. The border war continued between Hudson Bay Company and the American Fur Company and didn't end until 1833 when the American Fur Company abandoned its posts along the border in exchange for an annual cash payment from the Hudson Bay Company. So mergers and acquisitions, it's old stuff. Happening all the time, royalties, you name it. 1842, the American Fur Company fails financially and is replaced by Pierre and Company of St. Louis, which, St. Louis was another big French settlement. First capital of Missouri was Saint-Geneviève or St. Geneviève, which was along the Mississippi.
Pierre, South Dakota is named after Pierre Chateau.
There you go. 1850, the beaver hat was now out of fashion. It was replaced by a cheaper silk version, which ended the fur trade. So, a disruptive technology came in. So I think you saw that painting out there, but this is a fairly typical Voyager canoe. They got about a dozen or 14 people in there.
There's a woman in that picture.
Yeah, she's the artist.
See her?
She's
Frances
the
Hopkins.
wife of Hudson Bay Company.
In the middle of the picture is a woman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, right there, right there.
Yes, that's right.
She's the
It's
artist.
a little pixelated in this picture.
Yeah.
So this is what I had. If you want to have any questions, if you have any questions, please feel free.
She was there in case I got asked direction.
Find that song that has 1,000 verses. Okay, it's Au Chant de l'Alouette. That's it.
Oh.
I'm
sure they learned
Have any additional questions? Michael?
The dates again were parts of Minnesota were considered Quebec. When was that?
Dick, when was Minnesota considered Lower Canada?
Well, this map
Upper Canada.
was around the time of the Revolution, 1775 was the date. It was still part of, here was still part of French Canada.
But so the Louisiana Purchase is part of Minnesota. How did we get the rest?
The rest of Minnesota?
Yeah.
I think that was-
Was that the French and Indian War?
1818 at the Treaty of Ghent.
The Indian treaties were fixed.
What was that?
The border of the 49th parallel was established in 1818 at the Treaty of Ghent, which ended the
The War of 1812.
Oh, yeah.
So we want it back.
Well, okay, but then we just ignoring the Native Americans.
Oh, yeah.
Well, that's what everybody did, unfortunately.
I think it would be good to say French Canadian instead of French, because when you say French, a lot of Americans think you mean people from France.
So,
And most of these people came from Quebec.
so they all came from France originally. Yeah,
Those
and
were the
so,
original settlers.
so Médard Chouart, Groseilliers, and Pierre Radisson were from France. And they went back to France, actually, after they started the Hudson Bay
People in
Company.
Quebec would say they were Canadian.
Well, if they were there long enough. So there was a problem.
Most of the Voyagers were Canadian. They were
Yeah,
from
they,
Quebec.
that's true. That's
Because they were
true.
children and grandchildren.
Yeah, they had a gender problem because they had all these men, and so the king realized there was a gender problem. So he created this thing called les filles du roi, the daughters of the king, and he sent these single women over with a dowry that he provided, so that they could stay in France. So you go one generation beyond the original guys, and yeah, you could call them French Canadian, but some of them were French.
We could probably have a conversation for several hours about this. But one thing, I'm half French Canadian, and I didn't learn this until fairly recent years, that most of you know that the English won Quebec from the French. And most of you know that the French supported the Americans in the Revolutionary War
Otherwise, we'd still be
against the
British.
French Canadians, who had allied with the English, who were now in charge. And it gets all mixed up. There's antagonism, memories, you know, that never die about why the French Canadians are better than the French, or vice versa, or why the language is different, or all this other kind of stuff. There's just this endless controversy. It goes back to 250 years.
Yeah, the French Canadian language evolved in a certain direction, just like the African versions of French evolved in a different direction. And they all have their, well, it's less traditional actually in French Canada because they had to start inventing words for stuff. So they didn't have cars. So car in French Canada is called a char, which is short for chariot, which is a wagon. Because, you know, they just didn't have the vocabulary, so they, you know, invention is required at some stage. So, but there are some very ancient things about French Canadian French. When you say merci, they say bienvenue, which is literally you are welcome, which they said used in France in the 16th and 17th century, and it evolved in a different direction as well. So I'm not a professor of linguistics, but I speak a little bit of French and French Canadian. Yes, sir.
A question about the original French, I mean, the people from France who went to New France. Do we know what part of France they came from?
So a lot of them came from Normandy.
Normandy.
Yeah, but they came from all over. What they call in France the Massif Central, which is the interior of France. So a lot of folks from there. They were all just, fortune seekers.
I would say that a lot of them came from Normandy and Brittany because they were on the coast.
Right.
And they were the people that came across the ocean.
Yeah, so
Weren't a lot of them soldiers?
not during that time.
There was a couple
The soldiers came when the Hudson's Bay Company and the Northwest Company were trying to defend their territory, and that's when soldiers came over. So it was kind of the second wave, if you will.
There were 2 regiments, I think, of soldiers came over.
Yeah.
2 different periods of time.
So the Hudson's Bay Company soldiers were British for the most part, and then Northwest Company was a mix, but some French, yes, sir.
So we went to another program that talked about the diaspora of French Canadians in the East Coast into Maine,
The Acadians.
different places.
Yeah.
Was that when I'm French Canadian and my relatives came into Wisconsin to work for the warehouses? They came out of Quebec, but was that did that diaspora occur because the British took over Quebec, or what? It sounded like economic. I mean, they had no jobs.
Yeah, so it happened for a number of reasons. I'm not the expert on this, but his cousin is.
You have 90 acres. My great-great-grandfather had 90 acres, and he had 11 kids. And guess what?
The oldest kid gets the land. The oldest son.
That was his livelihood, but not his kids. They had to find another place to go, and there was only so much land.
Everybody was a
So
farmer.
they were looking for opportunities.
But why was there? You mean in Canada there was a limitation of land? I don't know.
No. This was in France.
In France,
I'm talking about Quebec.
Okay. Well, I mean, anywhere you go, there's going to be a.
But they left, but Minnesota had Homestead Act.
I see.
I mean,
They went where the opportunity
It was more attractive.
Yeah,
They went Saskatchewan and Alberta.
It had nothing. It had nothing to do with the British taking over Quebec.
Well, the Acadian diaspora did.
Yeah.
The Acadian diaspora did.
Yeah.
That was because they would not swear an oath to the British Crown.
I see.
And so they wanted to be apolitical. They would swear an oath to the British, but not to the king, because he wasn't their king, and that's why that happened.
My grandfather would never swear an oath to anybody. But
Your
If
ancestors
those
Acadian?
people came
French
to
Canadian, from Quebec.
Wisconsin, they probably came in
well,
the
is that
fur trade.
Acadian?
Well,
Yeah,
talk
I
to me
mean,
about that.
most of the Acadians were distributed along the East Coast. Half of them died during the diaspora because they just sent them out. British sent them out, didn't tell anybody they were coming, so the ship that set sail for Boston sat in the harbor for 9 months, and half of them died because they wouldn't take them in. There were 200 families that ended up in Louisiana, and that's where the most thriving Acadian culture exists today.
Those
But,
people didn't go to Wisconsin and Minnesota. The people
No.
that came here were people in the fur trade.
Yes,
And they were voyagers. They had nothing to do with the Acadians. They came out to work in the fur trade.
But there
And
were
they
people that
married
came in
native women, and they had mixed blood children.
There were a lot of people that came in the 1850s, though, that were.
Yeah, so-
But he's talking about the fur
But not
trade.
Acadians.
so
They're not Acadians.
my ancestors went back to France, And the branch of my family that came and stayed in the U.S., actually, it was a soldier. He was a mercenary during the American Revolutionary War, the French backing us, and ended up as commandant of Fort Vincennes in Indiana. And so the family stayed in Indiana, and his name was, just like everybody, Jean-Baptiste. So he was Jean-Baptiste, son of Racine, and his son was Jean-Baptiste, and his son was Jean-Baptiste. So it always makes genealogy work. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm just hearing about Acadia and Acadian, and I've always heard that, but I don't know what region that's from. Or
So it's Prince Edward Island,
Okay.
Nova Scotia,
New Brunswick.
New Brunswick. And the other ethnic group were Scots, primarily. Scots, English, and didn't like the French.
I think you should tell the story about why they were no longer in Prince Edward Island and what happened.
Well, I kind of did.
Oh, did you understand about them getting kicked out of there by the British?
The British.
Because they were worthy.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You're kind of getting outside my subject area here, but.
I just went to the Acadian reunion, my family Acadian reunion in Prince Edward Island, just got back.
Oh, wow.
They do Acadian reunions every 5 years.
So your family was Acadian, yet ended up in Minnesota somewhere.
Yeah, they got deported, ended up in Boston, they stayed there for 11 years, and they ended up in Quebec.
They were lucky they weren't the half they died in Boston too.
There's a very large population of French.
Yes, yeah, they're
The Acadian groups, yeah.
right. They sent them to all over the northeastern United States,
The
as
modern-
far south as New York, and then one group ended up in
And
Louisiana.
why, so they came for the fur trade or no?
No, they had nothing to do with the fur trade.
had nothing to do with it.
Yeah, this was another question on another subject.
Why did they come and settle then where they did in Prince Edward Island and Nova Scotia?
They were sent there by the British.
They were
No.
farmers.
No.
They were French.
Yeah, they came from France.
Colonists who
They were
lived in the
farmers.
Maritimes.
Yeah, they're farmers.
Start a new life and.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's the same thing that Mark talked about. I mean, happens in every country, or happened in every country. Why do you think most of the Scandinavians came here?
Okay.
They were not the oldest son,
My
and they didn't have any land, so they
My
came
first
to
ancestor
get land.
came to Acadia because he had a contract to make wood staves for barrels. And he had I have a copy of the written contract, it was 1646, and he was gonna make wood staves for barrels, or to cut down trees, make wood staves. He was gonna get 1/3 of the gross sales, and the investor was
That's a
gonna
heck
get
of a-
2/3. I had a contract, so they came over to make money.
Yeah,
And the Acadia was a separate independent colony of France, separate from New France.
well, yeah, it was, yeah.
So but prior to their expulsion by the British, they were, largely separate populations.
Right. They weren't really loyal to France, but they didn't want to be.
They wanted to be neutral.
Yeah, they wanted to be neutral, and unless you're Switzerland, I guess that doesn't work.
My ancestor was the first surgeon in Canada.
Oh.
He was a military surgeon.
You got
They had all men, Abraham Bourgeois. And there was all men, and they had no surgeons. And they conscripted him
Yeah,
to come over to be the surgeon.
wow.
And then when they had the 1750, he started Boisson County. He moved all his family out of,
Quebec?
no, Annapolis.
Oh,
Port Royal.
Yeah.
Moved all
Okay.
his family out of Port Royal up to Boisson County, which is on the way up toward Prince Edward Island.
oh, okay.
So that was part of them. Part
Very
of the rest of
interesting.
my family sort of went through the woods over to Quebec. They didn't get shipped out, they snuck out. Some went down to Massachusetts, different.
Right.
They snuck out.
Again, on a separate subject, but the two largest Ku Klux Klan chapters in the United States at the turn of the century were in Massachusetts and Maine, because of all the French Canadians that came down to work in the factories.
So we were talking about money. My 6th great grandfather was a Voyager. He got paid 240 pounds for a contract for 1 year.
It's pretty good.
You were trying to figure out the value.
That's pretty good.
Pretty good pay. That's pretty good pay for this. Must have been a gouvernail or a
That's what the pay was.
yeah.
This contract said.
Dick.
I have an interesting situation. I'm going to just pose it as a question to you or something to think about. I have one branch that is totally Voyager all the way down. My great-great-grandmother. They came to Dayton, Minnesota in the early 1850s on a warrant, a contract for free land that was given to the ancestor by a captain in the militia in the state of New York at the time of the War of 1812. Now, this is a French Canadian, and who comes here in, as I said, the early 1850s, up by Anoka, Dayton, Minnesota, right on the river, a good piece of property. And I speculate, because I know that this is true in some instances, that there were French Canadians who contracted out to the United States during these wars.
Sure.
Became an employee.
They're mercenaries.
And I can't prove this. I have the actual copy of the warrant that he received, by which he received the land in Minnesota.
Does it list any other names?
Yes.
I suspect what happened is that there was an American who received the land from the American government as a bounty for service.
Maybe the captain from New
Who
York.
had the the captain from New York, who had the option then of accepting the land or selling it and keeping the.
Yeah, it's a mystery to me. I just know what the fact is, that piece of paper.
And your family name is?
Bernard.
But the ancestor is Blondeau.
Blondeau, and Dayton?
Yeah, in Dayton.
Yeah.
Because that's where my ancestors.
By the way, speaking of French-Canadian vocabulary, girlfriend is a blonde. So apparently all Canadian women are blonde, but I haven't seen it. Une blonde, to this day. So my ancestor, Abraham Martin, or Abraham Martin, was given the land that became known as the Plains of Abraham from the governor of New France for services to.
That was your ancestor too?
Yeah, I got it.
Wow, you got royalty.
Yeah, the one who sailed from Belfast probably would have gone to Australia.
It's possible that every French Canadian has Abraham Martin as their ancestor.
Yes. I can complete a direct line.
I do.
We're all cousins. Yes, ma'am.
Customer service in French with French Canadians.
Yeah.
And I was trained to speak French from Paris, the Parisian way.
You and me both.
Right, so when I started, just sort of hopefully a funny anecdote, but when I started doing French Canadian customer service on the phone, couldn't understand what they were saying.
Yeah.
And they also said bonjour at the end. So I'm like,
Comment ça va? C'est pas pire, là.
So they were calling about the machine salad.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I've never seen your machine, and you're telling me technical things on the phone, and we're not speaking the same language. But the funny thing is, I found that they say it bonjour at the beginning and the end.
Yeah.
So that freaked me out when I was just like, okay, I'm done with the phone call, and they'd be like, bonjour, and I'd be like, what?
Well, depending on when they call, they also say bon matin.
Yeah, but they would always say like bonjour at the end, and then they'd hang up, and I'd be like.
You say bon matin in Paris, and they'll look at you like you're crazy.
Yeah.
That's Pierre.
It's like aloha in Hawaiian.
I'm sorry, did I see another hand up over here?
I never heard bon matin in Paris.
Oh yeah, oh not in Paris, no, it's Quebec only.
Oh, I've never been
Quebec
to
only,
I've
yeah.
never heard that. I mean, I've never been to Quebec.
Well, it's more like bon matin.
Are there clusters of French settlements in outstate Minnesota that?
Sure.
What are they?
Red River
79,
Valley.
there's 79 settlements, French settlements in Minnesota. It's in our book, they spoke French.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
79.
All right.
you can follow the names, Le Sueur, you know.
We've identified all the communities that have French.
Lucky Carl.
That's how we figured it out.
Red Lake Falls.
Red Lake Falls, yeah.
Argyle.
Red Lake Falls has a funny history because actually Little Canada was founded by people from Red Lake Falls before Red Lake Falls. Then they went back a generation later, founded Red Lake Falls. Gervais. Yeah.
We've identified 79 communities.
And when was it that they were not, the French language was suppressed? Everybody was trying to.
Well, for the first 200 years that people,
In the U.S.
the Europeans were here, they spoke French here. It was French and native languages.
So
That
like
was,
World War I?
oh yeah, so
I think
what you're talking
World War
about, yeah.
Yeah.
It was, I think as a result of a lot of Canadians coming during the Industrial Revolution, And so I think it was more like World War I, but I'd have to.
My family, because my grandfather, my dad spoke French, but World War II is what changed everything, because everyone wanted to be American.
Yeah.
And-
But I mean, there were states that outlawed the use of French in
Right.
schools,
Yeah.
and I think that was more World War I-ish.
Well, that was more like 1920, 1910.
Yeah,
Somewhere
okay.
in there.
World War I-ish.
1850 is about when English came to Minnesota.
Right,
With the
right along with the American Fur
Pillsbury's
Company.
and the Washburns and all of those people. Prior to that,
Henry Sibley.
they didn't have the treaties hadn't been signed, so the people from out east didn't move here until the treaties were signed about 1850, 1854. And when they came, those people who became the millers and all of that in Minneapolis, with them, they brought their money and they brought the English language.
But the Irish too, the Irish all spoke English.
Yeah, and the
A lot of
Irish.
came, a lot of Irish.
Right, when they all came about 1850, they brought English and they brought money. And they started the mills and the sawmills and the flour mills and all of that. Prior to that, everybody spoke French, dealing with the furs and whatever else.
1850
Or
was
the Dakota or Ojibwa languages.
1850 was the end of the fur trade, so there was no
Yeah.
real need.
This is a question that gets us away from the fur trade, but what's the role of the church in this story? The Catholic Church.
Yeah, huge, huge. In the fur trading, they brought a lot of clergymen with them in different times.
The Jesuits.
The Jesuits and, Hennepin, and they were trying to proselytize to the Native Americans.
And the Sacred Heart nuns?
Well, I don't think there were a lot of nuns in those days, but
Oh,
it was
yes.
I don't think they were coming down in canoes.
They were not.
Read about
Yes, they were.
All right.
Yeah.
Read about the Quebec Act of 1874, that was a huge act passed by the English that said the French could practice their Catholic religion. It's one of the reasons why the French Canadians didn't join the Americans, because they were Protestants. Quebec Act of 1874, read about that. That was a huge, huge act that was very, very smart by the English to do that, but it allowed the French Canadians to keep their Catholic religion.
I think you were talking about 1774.
1874.
1774.
Oh, 1774, yeah.
So
I'm sorry.
So when was St. Peter's Church
1841.
founded? Was it that late?
1841.
And then
St. Paul's Chapel was 1841.
Yeah, so probably
St. Peter's was a little before that.
so that's when the name changed from Pig's Eye Landing to St. Paul, 1841.
I like that.
Yes, Michael.
So just to, I feel honored to contribute to this. I've been
Absolutely.
saying all this, and I know so little and you know so much, but I do know something. I'm a member of Our Lady of Lourdes Parish,
Yes.
and we were doing some research.
Yeah.
And up until 1903, when Archbishop Ireland took over the Archdiocese, all the records were kept in French.
He didn't like
that at all.
He didn't like the
So
French.
he changed it all to English
Yeah.
and made everybody speak English.
He
in the
did found
Archdiocese.
my university. So I can't
1903.
do
1903.
but he
1904.
didn't like the French, he didn't like the Germans,
Why did he bring over
He was a
masquerade?
miserable SOB.
because he was a good architect.
And he was in charge. We
Thank you,
sing
everyone.
carols